A Murder of Ghosts. Written and read by Evie is Evil. Chapter 10. Author's Notes. I, for the life of me, couldn't find out where I wrote about what side of Jason was burned before, so for reference, and continuing forth, his right side is burned, and the J scar is on his left cheek. And reader's notes, I believe I found it, and I don't know if I fixed it in the writing, but I definitely said the right thing when I was recording the podfic of this. It was probably like chapter 3 or something like that. Alright, on to the fic. Danny wasn't having a great day. It first started with him waking up achy and sore. Rain pattered outside, trickling softly down his window. It seemed a cold front had swept over, bringing with it the pains of old injuries. He sat up, rubbing at his sore arm. His left arm was a bit numb and tingly, with an ache under that. Not particularly painful, but hard to ignore. He hated rainy days. They always made him so cold and miserable, often aggravating his scars. Danny shuffled out of bed, getting his things ready for school. When he grabbed his doorknob to leave, it gave his hand a small static shock. He jumped back, grasping his hand. White, hot, burning electricity shot up his arm, encapsulating his entire body. The air tasted of ozone and burning flesh. His skin burned and his heart felt like it was trying to tug out of his chest. Screaming filled his ears, and all he could see was green. The moment lasted mere seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Danny took in deep breaths. No, you're okay. You aren't in the lab. He slowly picked himself off the floor of his bedroom. How long had he been sitting there? Checking the time on his phone. His eyes widened, and he rushed out of his bedroom, barreling past his sister, who was just approaching his door. "Danny!" Jazz exclaimed. She must have been coming to check on him. "Sorry," he called behind himself. He would have to rush if he didn't want to be late. "Remember to grab breakfast," his sister called after him. Danny grabbed a granola bar on his way out the door. No other food was worth touching in the ecto-contaminated kitchen. It was geometry, and Danny couldn't focus. He had already finished all the problems on the worksheet he was given, and now he was just waiting for the class to finish. It was still raining outside. Not too heavy or light, but the kind that leaves everything in a damp chill. He was still a bit damp from his walk to school. He forgot his umbrella in his rush. Danny looked down at his left hand, at the Lichtenberg figures. Supposedly, they were supposed to disappear a couple days after his accident, but his never faded. The lightning-like scars trailed up his arm and branched out over his heart and trailed up part of his neck. When he first started meeting with frostbite, the doctor had theorized the marks stayed because it was some sort of death mark. Danny tried covering them at first, with sweaters and turtlenecks, but gave up when summer heat hit. Right now, Danny is bored, and boredom sucked on pain days, because all he could focus on was how his hand was tingly and achy. The focus always made it feel worse. He groaned and laid his head down on his desk. He rubbed up and down his left forearm with his right hand, squeezing in sections. The pressure rarely helped, but it was like one of those placebo effects. He knew it didn't really help, but it was better than doing nothing. "Bad pain day?" Sam asked when Danny sat down for lunch. "Yeah," he sighed wearily. "How'd you guess?" "It's a cold front rain," Tucker butted in. "And you tend to use your left arm less when it hurts," Sam finished. "Huh, I guess I do." Danny did tend to let his arm just dangle on bad days as well. Not all the time, but definitely more than usual. Another placebo. It didn't help, but it gave his brain the illusion of helping. Probably the worst part of his entire accident is the fact that he's left-handed. Well, was. Danny is also being dramatic. That was definitely not the worst part of the whole accident. When he first woke up in the hospital after his accident, Danny couldn't really move his left hand. He was told he probably wouldn't regain much function in the limb, and was taught to write with his right hand in physical therapy. Luckily for Danny, and to his doctor's bafflement, he ended up gaining most function in his left arm back. The only fault that remained was a bit of numbness that got worse on bad days.
Danny?
Danny! A hand waved in front of his face.
Huh? Sorry.
Danny blinked back into focus. Another downside of pain days is later in the day he gets more and more spaced out and exhausted.
You're good, dude. You were just spacing out. Lunch is almost over, Tucker informed him.
Oh. Danny just went back to drifting. He wasn't all that hungry, and spacing out just felt good right then. Jason sat still as he let Frostbite unwrap his hands.
Well, Robin, it seems like we can keep these unbandaged for now.
The doctor had come in earlier and taken an x-ray of his hands before clearing him to have the restrictive bandages removed.
The skin of the burns, like the rest of your face, may be a bit sensitive to textures for a while it heals.
Frostbite added more of his salve, but didn't rebandage his digits. Jason observed his fingers. They were all a little crooked. None perfectly straight anymore, but he wasn't expecting much else. His right hand, trailing up his arm, was pink, and the skin was a bit shiny and tight, with healing burnt skin. Both his wrists had faint bruise lines, and the skin was wrinkling slightly weird, but otherwise healed. You could barely tell he was chained by the wrists not too long ago. Jason's face was in a similar state to his right hand, but the sensitive skin was unbandaged way earlier. The damage was mostly contained to the right half of his face. He got to see himself in Danny's phone camera a couple days ago. He wasn't expecting to see a streak of white in his hair, but after seeing Danny transform a couple of times, he guesses it made some sense.
The only ghosts I've seen have white hair. Maybe it's a ghost thing?
Something to ask Danny later. In the camera, he also noticed his right eyelid was sagging a bit. It didn't seem to affect his vision, but it definitely displayed how bad the scarring on his face was. The partial symmetry of it being on one side reminded him of Harvey Dent, the ex-lawyer turned Gotham rogue. The worst bit was the giant J carved into his left cheek. He remembered the Joker carving it as a sort of trophy or marker. Jason shuddered just thinking about it. He went back to inspecting his hands. He knew from experience with his face, and from the few times he got burns during his nighttime activities, that pretty much any texture would be horrible on his sensitive skin. He left his arm to gently rest on the smooth texture of the side table. With his left, unburned hand, he picked up one of his books to continue reading. He was on the second series of the Warriors franchise.
Who knew a book about wild cats would have so many books?
As he was settling in, flipping his book open to his bookmark.
Yes, he uses a bookmark. He isn't a heathen.
Danny floated in. He was in his human form today, and he looked exhausted. He immediately collapsed into the cushioned chair next to Jason's bedside and flopped his face onto the bed, arms dangling free in the gap.
What happened to you?
Jason asked.
Mm.
Danny groaned into the mattress unintelligibly.
Thanks. I really understood that well.
Jason smirked with a small smirk. Danny just reached behind himself for a cushion and threw it at Jason's face. Jason caught it, naturally.
You ass,
Danny groaned while pushing himself up.
I just had a bad pain day,
he told Jason.
Ah, yeah, those suck,
Jason told him in response. He's had a few himself. Old scars got sore on cold nights, sucked especially out on the streets. When he moved in with Bruce, it got better. Having a warm bed to sleep in at night helped loads. Bruce had also given him creams and such for the pain, when he eventually told the man on one particularly rough night after patrol.
Bandage break?
Danny asked, eyeing his unwrapped arm on the side table.
Nope. Supposedly, I'm in the clear.
he told the ghost boy, who, in response, just inspected his arm further.
Is the skin sensitive? Burns can get like that,
Danny asked before standing up again.
Actually, I'll be right back.
He left before Jason could even process his first question. A couple minutes later, Danny returned carrying a very large, soft-looking blanket. It was a gradient of black, navy blue, and purple, with white speckles all over it. It looked like a galaxy.
Is that a galaxy blanket?
Jason asked.
Yeah, Danny grinned. It's my favorite blanket in Frostbite's stash.
He carried the blanket over and threw it over Jason's legs. It must have come from the chests in the room Jason and Danny trained in. Jason rubbed his not-burned fingers through the fibers of the fabric and found it to be a really soft fleece, the kind that is slightly silky to the touch.
This might not bother my burns.
He lifted his right arm and pushed the side table away. Carefully, he lowered his arm onto the soft fabric.
Not too painful.
Jason went ahead and rearranged the blanket to lie a bit more flat and comfortably over his torso, while Danny covered the bottom of his cot.
Glad I didn't have to do the kick thing.
It's always annoying trying to kick a blanket to lay straight, especially difficult with two casted feet. When he sat back down, Danny eyed the blanket a little longingly, before tucking his hands between his thighs.
He's cold,
the detective part of Jason's brain decided to comment. Jason just sighs a little fondly, before patting the foot of his bed.
Sit,
he commands. Danny's eyes go a little wide, before he crawls up onto the end and places the blanket over his lap. It's a little awkward with Jason's legs, but he scooches them off to one side.
So, bad pain day. Want to talk about it?
He asks. Danny sighs.
My arm gets sore on cold days. The numbness also gets worse.
He punctuates this by rubbing his left arm. Jason observes the limb lying a little limply on the other boy's lap. It's got a bunch of scars branching up the limb and under his sleeve. Jason also notices the same pattern creeping out of the collar of the boy's shirt.
How'd you get those?
He asks before thinking.
Shit, that was rude.
Danny definitely gets a bit somber, but answers his question regardless.
I got it in my accident. Electrical burns. These are called Lichtenberg figures,
he says while pointing to the branching red lines under his skin. Jason had seen similar scars on electrical shock victims before, but he never knew the name.
Do the lines hurt?
He asks curiously.
Not really. There's a lot of nerve damage, so it kind of feels like when your foot falls asleep. It's tingly and numb.
Danny seems awfully patient and willing to answer Jason's questions.
I don't have any like that, Jason comments. Most of my old scars just ache or burn under the skin.
Those kinds are the worst, Danny sympathizes.
They are. B gave me a cream one time, and that helps manage the pain, though, Jason comments.
They have a cream for that?
Danny leans forward curiously.
Yeah, I think it's for back pain mostly, but it works on old scars.
Huh, I might have to get some for myself,
Danny muses. Jason just shrugs noncommittally. Danny adjusts himself. He curls up into a ball and wiggles under the blankets more at the foot of the bed. Jason, in response, just pulls his end up a bit higher over his shoulders.
Who's B?
Danny asks, a hint of drowsiness leaching into his voice.
B?
Jason asks. Danny just hums back in confirmation.
He's Bruce, my
dad, adopted dad. He's like hella rich and lives in a mansion. He always sleeps in and hates going to work. He acts like a bumbling idiot in public, but is one of the smartest people I know.
How'd you meet?
Danny asks. I stole the tires off his car and hit him with a tire iron when he tried to stop me. Danny jolted at this, snapping his eyes open to stare at Jason. He huffed out a laugh.
Yeah, no way. I'm calling bull on that one,
Danny says, letting his eyes close once again.
Say what you want, but it's true. He made me put the tires back on and drove me back to his mansion.
Isn't that considered kidnapping?
Danny asked, eyes still closed. Probably. I'm pretty sure I saw him bribe a few social workers.
Rich people are Fruit Loops,
Danny mumbled, starting to slur his words. Now it was Jason's turn to laugh. You call people Fruit Loops? He asked disbelievingly. Danny hummed in response, taking a second before properly responding.
You're no better. What even is a dicky bird?
Jason laughs.
Actually, I don't want to know.
Danny adds on. That's a nickname for my brother. Jason laughs out.
Oh, that makes a little more sense. Still weird, though.
Danny mumbles. He likes to be called Dick.
Who does that?
Danny asks incredulously. People named Richard, apparently. Jason banters back.
Only old people named Richard prefer Dick.
He would take great offense to that, Jason defends. He's in his teens.
Older?
Danny asks. Yeah, by about 3-ish years.
Adopted or born in?
Also adopted.
Kidnapped in or like normal process?
Danny asks, mostly in jest.
What even is a normal adoption process?
I suppose more on the kidnapped side? Bruce broke him out of juvie.
Juvie?
Danny asked. Yeah, his parents died in a trapeze accident. Social services were overrun, so they threw him in juvie. Bruce broke him out and brought him home. Alfred wasn't happy. Danny was quiet for a long time.
I can't tell if you're lying or not. Like, that's crazy.
Most things in my life were. Danny just hums again in an agreeable response.
Who's Alfred?
He's our family butler. He used to work for the British Secret Service. He's like my grandfather. He raised Bruce after his parents died. I enjoyed cooking with him. I was the only one he let in the kitchen, Jason preened. He always made tea or hot cocoa when I returned from school.
He sounds nice,
Danny comments. A hush falls over them. Jason himself is starting to feel drowsy at this point.
Is everyone in your family an orphan?
Danny asks eventually. The bluntness of the question startles Jason a bit, but he finds he doesn't actually mind. He hums, taking a bit of time to think. I guess so. Yeah, Alfred's parents have got to be dead by now. Bruce's parents died, and so did Dick's, and mine... He trails off. Catherine and Willis's deaths were old hurts by now. They still stung, but he's grieved them before. Sheila, the mom he went to Ethiopia for, she probably died with Jason in the explosion. Huh.
What?
Danny asks. Sheila wasn't great to him. She left him at birth, and when he finally sought her out, she sold him off to the Joker, and both of them paid the price. She was by no means a good mom, yet Jason still felt the need to grieve for her. Nothing. Just, I'm realizing I am an orphan. Danny's face scrunches up a bit in confusion, but he doesn't ask any further questions. After a few seconds, Jason can note the slowed breathing of the older boy. He himself is feeling drowsy, so he lets his heavy eyes flutter shut. Both boys end up napping under the same large galaxy blanket. Danny wakes up stiff and more sore than he was when he fell asleep. It was an overall warm stiffness, which normally sucks, but Danny felt quite content laying curled up at the end of that bed. He looked up and saw Robin was still asleep. Danny just laid back down and let the grogginess of his nap consume him into sleep once again. And that is the end of Chapter 10. Author's notes. Wow, my experience with chronic pain really just shoved their way out here, huh? Anyways, there's nothing worse than having a bad pain day and being bored in class. All your brain can focus on is how bad it hurts. Poor Danny. On more pressing matters, unfortunately, I have been struggling with writer's block. Sad face.
I don't have chapter 11 written, and I'm flying home for the holidays in 3 days. I'll be busy for the entirety of that, and I have a big project in school when I come back. While I don't plan on abandoning this fic, I want to warn y'all, I could continue to post on time, or it could take up to 5 weeks for me to post again. Sad face. Edit. A second fic was added to this series. It's just another short one-shot of more shenanigans that didn't quite make the cut for this fic. Now, reader's notes? Lots to talk about here. Edits on these author's notes. The next chapter that's going to be posted will be in 2 weeks, and it is that one-shot because I want to extend the time I have to write the rest of this fic, because currently I only have up to chapter 11 written and posted. Yeah. So y'all are getting the one-shot next time this uploads, and then you'll get chapter 11 eventually. It's written, it's going to be recorded, we're going to be good. Then you guys have to wait. And this podfic will probably take a hiatus, along with the actual fic, because I do need to write it, and I kind of haven't been, and I've been focusing on podfics. Yay! But I also have a new podfic that'll probably take over this time slot in the week, once this is done. So, yeah, that'll be exciting. But yeah, this fic, I'm realizing that the chapters that I have written are mostly just, they're very, me projecting. Like this one was, I can actually perfectly picture what day I was thinking about when I wrote this. I had like a really bad day in school where I was so bored in class and just had a really bad pain flare-up, and all I could think about was the pain because I was bored in class and there's nothing else to think about. Oh, hated that. But yeah, a lot of the pain described is also snippets of like what I feel sometimes. I've actually been doing better since I moved. I guess the environment is different. I don't know what it is. But yeah, I've been feeling better, which is great. Less pain, yay! I'm yapping a lot. I don't care, y'all are getting a yap fest. And then chapter 12, which I'm working on, I'm realizing is also me projecting very heavily on a certain weather phenomenon in the new location that I'm living in. Y'all are gonna get that when y'all get that. You're gonna get that when you get that. Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna pre-apologize for the next upload, which is really short. I recorded it already before this one. It's like 3 minutes long. It's not very long. And I'm gonna apologize for that, and I'm not gonna get y'all excited for a new chapter next week when it's just a tiny little thing. But yeah. I feel like I covered most of it. Cool. Anyways, thanks for listening to my Yap Fest, and bye!